What's up, everybody? I'm John Salter, and welcome to Switch 2 News Daily Episode 1. Since the Switch 2 has been out a couple months already, I'm just going to go over some bullet points from the news from over the last couple months, and that should get us all caught up, so going forward, all the Switch 2 new dailies will be current. So let's get started with the original Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, which announced the Switch 2 and kind of got the ball rolling, officially announcing the Switch 2, what to expect, and I suggest if you haven't watched that Direct, go ahead and watch it. You can kind of compare, what's happened since as opposed to what was in the Direct. But one of the things that really kind of got the ball rolling on the drama side of it was during the Direct, they announced the release date of the Switch and the pre-order date, and there was no pre-order date for the US due to the tariffs. So the tariffs were a big deal for a couple weeks. I don't think it was much longer than that until it was kind of ironed out and they made a deal to where there was a reprieve, and the price wasn't really that much in doubt of what it would be compared to the price point they were talking about. I think some of the peripherals did go up a little bit from the original announcement, but in general, the Switch 2 system itself pretty much stayed the same price, and eventually they were able to release a release date for the US, or for a pre-order date for the US, which was a big deal. So once that was announced, then everybody got ready for the pre-orders, and then all the websites and speculation and everybody giving tips of how to get a Switch and where to get one and all that was the hype for, weeks up until the release day of the Switch. So personally, I went ahead and I ended up getting one off of Walmart.com at midnight, and I also stayed in line at GameStop because I wanted to make sure that I got one. So I got there like hours early, and it's not like old school. Back in the day, we'd camp out 2 days. I think the PS2, we camped out 2 days at Walmart for the PS3. I got there like, I think 12 hours before the thing went on sale, and there was nobody in line. So I was the first one in line. So it definitely wasn't like the old days. And then on my phone, I was able to procure one from Walmart.com while I was waiting in line, which I ended up getting that to my buddy who wasn't able to get one. Things were crazy, and it's fun to think back of that night and just people not being able to get them and the panic that ensued. And that's kind of the fun, of these, pre-orders and release days. Back in the day, we didn't even do pre-orders. You would get there for the console on that day, hence the PS3. That wasn't a pre-order. Actually, that was a pre-order. The PS3 waited 2 days to get the pre-order on that. But similar, similar setup, but, different system. So that was kind of fun once we got to that point and awaiting, the Switch 2 to get released. But the tariffs were a big deal, and I know they're still lingering in the background a little bit. The tariff thing is kind of going back and forth, but it seems like things are pretty stable right now, but we'll see how it goes in the future. So after that, then the Switch 2 was actually released, which ended up being the fastest selling console in history with 3.5 million units sold in the first 4 days, which was pretty amazing. And what was really fun to watch with that is that, people either saying the numbers were fudged or, fanboys of other systems in denial that the Switch 2, could possibly beat the PS2. And I'm actually kind of shocked. What's more shocking than the actual Switch 2 selling that many consoles in that time frame was the fact that Sony didn't somehow magically come up with some sales they forgot about that would put the PS2 back ahead. That's more amazing that never happened. But that was pretty amazing, and I think we all kind of saw that coming because Nintendo actually had production ramped up. That was one of the reasons that they were able to make that many sales, because they really did do a good job on the production side, and you were able to get a Switch 2. It wasn't like it was dry from the release date till now. I actually picked up 2 in the time frame between release date to now for a couple friends of mine. So you could go in and get them. You just had to do your due diligence and stop in every day. GameStop, Best Buy, scan online. The ones I purchased, I got both of those from GameStop by just stopping in, and both times they had one left, allegedly. I don't think they were lying, but 2 days in a row, actually. So you were able to get them, and I think that's one of the reasons Nintendo, was able to get those high numbers, is they did have the production in place. And who knows what the PS5 would have done, due to COVID and supply chain and all that. It was kind of rough to get, systems made. So who knows? I still think the Switch 2 would have probably still beat it, because the hype was pretty real for the Switch 2, because you have a lot of casual gamers along with, the hardcore Nintendo gamers as well. So moving on from that, we had the demand exceeding supply, but not to the extent of previous consoles, which is what I kind of just went over. How you could get one and you can still get one, and even now you could. It's a little easier to get one, even though the stores around me, I go in and don't see any, but I think it's still getting easier. And as time goes on, demand is going down for those first, group of people like us. I'm assuming people watching this video who really wanted one that would do what it takes to get one. That demand is dropping down, so you're going to see more in stores, I think, as time goes on. And then once Christmas hits, we'll see how hard they are to get again. Along with that, Mario Kart World was the best-selling title for the Switch in June, with 82% of Switch 2 buyers purchasing the game, which makes sense because I'm assuming, maybe not 82%, but a good quantity, a good percentage of those people bought the Mario Kart bundle because you're saving $30. So that wasn't too hard to believe, and it's Mario Kart. People love the game. And, there's a lot of other things that went on in the news. I'm just kind of hitting bullet points of things that I remember that were a big deal, that people were kind of, crying about or cheering about, I guess, either way. Donkey Kong Bonanza, Nintendo Direct, that was a big deal. We all watched that and we saw a lot of things. We wonder what the game was going to be like. Are we just smashing things? What's going on here? And so that was a big deal because, again, we haven't seen a Donkey Kong game in years. So that was a pretty big news deal. And that was, that was milked throughout the YouTube news cycle as well up until release date of the game. That was a big news story. The 256 internal storage drama, which I thought like, well, this original Switch was 32, and I think the OLED was 64. So we're getting 256. So they're really crushing how much space we have on this console. But the games are a lot bigger. So, for me, I was able to fit all my games, then some, and I picked up an SD Express, which we'll move on to that in a minute. But that was a big deal because some of these games that are digital are pretty big. I think Cyberpunk was one that was mentioned. I didn't purchase the game. Maybe I'll get it eventually, but it's not really something I was too interested in getting right off the bat. But those games really are sucking a lot of that internal space up. So you definitely do need an SD card, but that takes us to the SD Express, which those things are, it's new technology. So we're talking a pretty expensive, card there compared to a regular micro SD card. So, and they were hard to get. It wasn't something you could just walk in and purchase. Now, the day that I pre-ordered my Switch, I got up on YouTube and there was on Amazon, and it wasn't even a Prime sale. It was just a regular sale. I usually buy everything with Prime because it's easier to return if there is an issue. And I got a 256 for $47 shipped, which was a pretty good price then. And then they got really hard to get. So I grabbed one as early as I could when I found out that, it was some newer technology and they weren't as prevalent in stores to purchase. So the whole SD Express is a big deal because of another price point. So we're talking an expensive system, $449 or $499, depending on which one you get, along with buying, even if you get the smallest, the 256 micro SD Express, I paid $47, which was a deal. $60 to $65 was, I think, the low end, unless you found a cheap one like I did. So that was, I put that as part of the drama because, hey, it's more money we're spending. But, if you don't want to spend the money, you don't buy it, so you got to do what you got to do. And moving on from that, this is a little bit further on down the road. I'm probably skipping a lot, but we try to get the daily news here done in like 5 minutes. So we might go over just rehashing things here, but I'm going to move on to the D-brand kill switch drama. That was a big deal because they were pushing that D-brand case, the D-brand kill switch case. I mean, I swear D-brand hit up every big YouTuber to push that case because every video I watched had them pimping that case. And I'm not a big case on a handheld guy, and I'm not a big pay that much money for a case guy. And we're going to get into these cases, reviews, and a lot of this stuff in our other videos. And I'll show you what I use and kind of like how I find the deals and better prices on things. But that was a very expensive case, and it looked like a nice case. I'm not knocking it whatsoever, but they had an issue with the Joy-Cons coming off. So if you held it a certain way, due to the leverage and the way the Joy-Cons attach and hold into the Switch, they had basically a leverage point that was allowing that the Switch 2 to come off just by holding it in one. Go ahead and check out some videos on it. We're going to overlay a lot of videos in this a lot of videos over top in this video so you can see what I'm talking about as I'm talking about it. But that was a big deal, and that led to them actually redesigning the case after a lot of pushback. They came back with kind of a, not a very nice response to the people who purchased that, and it didn't go over well. I mean, that's one thing I'll say about these communities now is you can't pull some BS and give some half-assed answer when you're selling something that expensive that's supposed to be a premium product like that. So there's a lot of pushback, and dbrand did fold, and they redesigned it. And I think they just announced over the last few days that those are available for people to return and get that. So that's the kill switch drama. That was a big deal because so many YouTube channels pushed that case that when that happened, they looked bad, and I don't blame any of these guys for maybe canceling their deals with dbrand or putting them on hold till that was resolved, because that's their reputation at stake as well. So that was some pretty good drama. The Nintendo Switch price hike. So that's recent. So we're getting a little bit closer to some of the other news stories. The Nintendo Switch, instead of the price going down, which is traditionally what happens with system, Nintendo cranked the price up. Now, of course, Nintendo does things different, and I can see where they're coming from, and as this channel grows, you'll see more of how I was involved, or how I was involved with running my own business, not just trying to run a YouTube channel as a business, but running my own businesses. I ran a classic arcade landscape business. I had a lot of businesses over the years. And the one thing I can tell you is I can feel how these companies feel about raising prices and having to make money, because it's a business. They need to make money. They're in business to make money. They're also in business to make their customers happy and make cool games, which I think they do live up to that. I'm a big fan of Nintendo as far as gaming and the IPs they have in the Switch. The Wii U I thought was great. So call me crazy. And just for transparency, I was a huge Sega guy back in the Genesis days. So I really like what Nintendo's doing, and I like their products. But you got to do what you got to do. So hiking the price up of the Switch, I can see the business side of that. Like, let's crank that price up so people walk in the door and say, hey, why would I buy a Switch when for $50 more I can buy a Switch 2? But it's very simple to say if the stores have those in stock. If you don't have the Switch 2 in stock and you're cranking that price up, you're kind of, you're putting people in a bind of what to do and having to wait. But, Nintendo can do what they want to do, but that was a big news item and people were crying about it, and all of the, of course, hoopla on YouTube about it. But that was a big deal, and that's recent. The game card drama with the key cards. For some reason I didn't write key card in my notes. I don't know why, but the key cards. And that's something I really don't get into, because I used to collect. I don't collect anymore because it's just not worth it. So I don't care. I'm fine with all digital. I'd rather have all digital, but it's not all about me. People want to collect. People want to buy the games, have collections. I have friends that have huge collections, amazing collections. Not my thing anymore, but I get it. But I don't think too much of it. And again, these companies are in the business of making games, not making your collection. So if you choose to collect something from a company, that's on you. And if they stop making that and whatever you're collecting and go digital, I kind of want to say too bad, so sad. You're the one collecting it. They're not selling their products as a collector's item. They're selling their games on cartridge. Well, now we don't need that because we can do digital. So I'm not trying to be mean about it, but I'm just simply stating where the companies are coming from. They can sell it whatever format they want. And if you're a collector, it kind of sucks, but you're at the mercy of what they want to do. But another news point, along with that, is Nintendo actually, there was enough pushback again from the community that Nintendo actually came out and stated like, hey, I think they did a poll. Again, I didn't follow it that closely because it's not my thing. And we weren't doing the news at the time. But Nintendo had a I believe it was a poll, questionnaire, or something, user feedback, that you could give feedback on your opinion of the key cards, which was great. I think that's all for it. And I'm all for Nintendo being open and listening to it. And then, are they doing that just to appease everybody, or are they really going to take that feedback and do something with it, maybe change it? So hopefully for all the people that collect, see, I'm not a hater. I'm not going to say screw you. I don't think quit making the key cards so you can't collect. Or quit making full games on cartridges or key cards or whatever the hell they call them now, like game card, I'm all for it. Make game cards, make digital, because as long as I can get digital and I want it, that's great. And if people can get the game cards, that's great too. It'd be great if everybody was happy, but it doesn't work that way. So we'll see what happens, and we'll keep you abreast of the situation on our daily news show. So moving along from that, the key card drama, again, I'm probably opining a little more on this than I want to, but it's kind of hard for me not to, because I've been doing this for so long, and it's fun to talk about and give our opinions on it. So let's go ahead and move on to our next bullet point here. The key card, Switch 2 overheating. All right, so this one, I will mention that a lot of these bullet points I am going to do my own opinion pieces on of what I think, so I'm not going to go too crazy into it here. But can we quit with the overheating already? Every system from the day they've come out, there's been somebody crying about it overheating. The PS1 actually did have an overheating process, and the crazy fans that they made for that thing were insane. And a buddy of mine who has a massive collection has some of those fans, so I'm gonna have to see if I can get some of those fans from him and bring him on when I do my overheating rant. But yeah, the overheating is ridiculous. The Switch is not overheating. The Switch 2 does not need any extra fans on it. If you want to get one and it makes you feel better, go ahead and get one. But I'm on a lot of Nintendo Switch 2 news groups, and I've already done a ton of testing before I kicked the channel off on a lot of these docks, third-party docks, and I noticed no difference in heat, even on the worst dock that blocks the vents on the Switch 2. It was the same temperature as the Switch 2 in the Nintendo dock. And then there's a couple videos out there. I'll point these videos out in my op-ed on the overheating, where they basically taped off all the vents and it still ran fine. And the temperature that it got to max wasn't really completely horrible for the vents being completely taped off. But we'll get into that at a later date. Let's move on with the bullet pointed news. So again, we got the whole heating drama. Oh, and to move on from that, a news story. Nintendo, which I thought was a terrible move, brought out, released a memo or whatever you want to call it, talking about it overheating and telling people not to play it outside in 95 degrees and all this, which I just thought was a terrible idea. There's also been videos since then that show the Switch in a hot car in 100-degree weather, which it's hotter inside the car and it's playing just fine. But I don't blame Nintendo. There's nothing wrong with doing a little CYA, telling people don't play it in over 95-degree weather. And if you do, hey, it's on you and something goes wrong. Why anybody would play their Switch 2 outside in 95-degree weather, I don't know why, but hey, do what you got to do. But that was another bullet point, the whole overheating, which is always a thing with these consoles, kind of annoying. But let's move on with, what do we have here? Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase. We were supposed to launch the channel last week along with that Nintendo Partner Direct, and it just didn't happen. I have a completely different spin on the Partner Direct than every other, I think, YouTube channel where everybody was complaining and crying and how terrible it was. I will go ahead and I'm going to do an op-ed on that, so I'm not going to get too far into it. But my opinion of that is Nintendo's just saying, hey, we're going to have third-party support like we didn't have on previous systems, previous consoles. So I think that was the main point of their Direct. And I do think there was a little trolling going on by Nintendo there with the whole chilling by the campfire. Why that got more than 4 seconds on the Nintendo Direct, I don't know. And I also thought it was funny that they threw in right in the middle, like, oh, by the way, Hyrule Warriors, it'll be here when it's here. You know, no date, no nothing, just we can call it a teaser, but I'm almost calling it a troll. But and we'll talk about that at a later date. But that Nintendo Direct partner showcase was nice, and there's a lot of news and rumors going about that's some type of 3-part Direct. The second part being the Indie World Showcase, which we just got a few days ago, and then another Direct in a few months or whatever. So we're going to end it here at the Indie World Showcase. Any other news is close enough to this time frame that we'll just fade that in with tomorrow's Switch 2 News Daily. So that's just to kind of wrap up and, you know, give us a quick timeline of some of the bullet points in the news and get us caught up, because we want to start these news episodes with the start of the Switch 2 so we can chronicle that through the whole life of the Switch 2. So anyway, if you like the video, go ahead and make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell button so you get the notifications, and to help us get the channel going, get us in the algorithm. I appreciate anybody who's watched the video all the way through till the end, and I'll see you tomorrow in the next Switch 2 Daily.